Hi, my name is Annie Glass, and I'm one of the mentors in ISMP in the Texas region. And I graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in molecular environmental biology. And I currently work at a tech startup in downtown Austin, Texas. So I know it can be hard to figure out conversation in a new language and a new culture. When I was an undergrad, I studied abroad in Brazil for a semester, and I had to speak Portuguese every day. And I remember feeling self-conscious that I didn't know how to say things politely, and I was worried that everything I said was coming off as blunt and rude. And there were also a lot of misunderstandings I would have when I didn't understand people, and I may have even offended them. And even to this day, I can only guess what happened in those situations. But through a lot of effort, my Portuguese improved until I was basically fluent by the time I left. And in fact, some of my friends said they would even forget that I wasn't a native speaker. So I say this not to brag, but to really encourage you guys that with effort, you can improve a lot, even in a short amount of time. So as someone who's been through it, I want to give you some tips that will hopefully make it a little bit easier to get used to talking with Americans. And I tried to make this really practical with a lot of specific phrases that sound natural, so it wouldn't be so scary to go through some of these conversations. So the first area where people can make mistakes is at the very beginning of a conversation. It can be hard to know how to get started, especially with someone you've never met before. And some situations where this can apply is times like when you're waiting for class to start and you're standing next to some of your classmates, or if your friend invites you over for dinner and meet some of their friends. So, I think not knowing how to start the conversation can prevent us from having one at all. So how can we get the conversation started? So I think one really easy way to start it is to just say, "Hi, I'm Annie." Just by saying your name, most people will respond back by telling you their name. And then you can just say, "Hi, John, nice to meet you." And then if someone is introducing you to someone they know, you can just say, "Hi, nice to meet you." And then one thing is, if you've already met them before and you're seeing them again, you can say, "Oh, it's good to see you again." I know some people who always say, "Nice to meet you," every time they see that same person over and over again, and that sounds a little funny. So "good to see you" is a good way to say that. And then one tip to help you remember that person's name is to use their name in the first few sentences you say, like, "Oh, nice to meet you. Oh, John, did you hear in the news such and such?" All right, so let's practice. So I'm going to say, "Hi, I'm Annie." And you guys are all, at home with your cameras off. No one can see you. So go ahead and respond back to me in the way that you would in a conversation. So ready? "Hi, I'm Annie." Nice. You guys sounded great. Good job. All right. So once you've started the conversation, how do you keep it going without long, awkward silences? So here are some things that you can ask about that sound natural. You can ask about the person's hometown, their occupation, what they do for a job or what they study if they're a student, what they do for fun. And then once they've shared some things with you, one way to really make the conversation more engaging is to try to make connections with what that other person has told you and your own experience. So if someone says, "Oh, I'm from Guangzhou," you could say, "Oh, I have a friend from Guangzhou," or "Oh, I've visited Guangzhou before." Or if they say, "Oh, I like photography," you could say, "Oh, I like photography too. What kind of camera do you have?" And then even if you don't have personal experience with something, even if you know something about it, you could share that. If someone says, "Oh, I like the Houston Rockets," you can say, "Oh yeah, I heard they won their game yesterday." So those are good ways to just keep the conversation going. And then also to share about yourself as well. You don't want to just ask the other person questions. That can feel a little bit like an interview or even interrogation. So be sure that as they're sharing about themselves, open up about yourself and share things about yourself as well. Now, at the same time, there are some things to avoid. These are things that are generally kind of uncomfortable in American conversation. So you never want to ask about their age or weight. You never want to mention that someone looks like they've gained weight. You never want to ask about salary or finances in general. And then also marital status can be a little bit touchy, whether someone's married or single or dating. And then also if they're married, if they're planning on having children. Those can just be things that can be sensitive depending on the situation. And then lastly, you never want to ask a woman if she's pregnant, because what if she's not, right? So those are all things to avoid when you're having conversation. And then one other thing that often comes up is, especially if you're learning English for the first time, you might not hear someone well. And so how do you ask, for them to repeat themselves? So you can say things like, sorry, or pardon, or sorry, I didn't catch that. And then if you're just having a really hard time hearing them and you have to keep asking them to repeat themselves again and again, saying something like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. Maybe we can go somewhere quieter is a good way to just help that situation. All right. So number 3 is nonverbal communication. So 93% of communication is nonverbal. And that includes things like tone of voice, facial expression, the way you stand. So just to give you an example, I'm going to say the same words twice, but with different nonverbal communication. So if someone asks me, can you help me with your math homework, with my math homework? I could say, yes, I can help you with your math homework. Or I could say, yes, I can help you with your math homework. So I use the same words both times, but you can tell that I meant two very different things. In the first instance, I was actually happy to help them with their math homework. And in the second situation, I really didn't want to help them with their math homework, right? And I think nonverbal communication is something that actually varies a lot from culture to culture. But because it's something that we're not as consciously aware of, it could be really hard to notice and figure out. So we often just get this vague sense that something is off without exactly knowing why. So here's a few tips around nonverbal communication when talking with Americans. So the first thing is personal space. So Americans prefer about 60 to 90 centimeters between them and the person they're talking to. And that's about the distance if you were to stretch your arm straight out. And this is a little bit more space than some people in other cultures. So if you're not sure if you're standing too close, what you can do is just watch out to see if that person subtly takes a small step away from you. And if they do, then that probably means that they're adjusting to that right amount of space for them. And so if they do that, just let that space remain between you. I've had some situations where I felt a little too close to an international student, so I take a little step back, and then they take a little step closer, and then I take a step back, and they take a step closer. So, just try to be aware of that. And, if in doubt, you can always leave a little bit more space between you. And then that other person can always take a little step closer to you if they want to. And then in the area of physical touch, how should you greet someone? I know that in a lot of cultures, there's some kind of customary greeting to give. Maybe it's a hug or maybe it's a kiss on the cheek. But in America, we don't really have something like that. So if you meet someone for the first time, usually you would shake their hand as you say, nice to meet them. But if it's someone you already know, there's no customary physical greeting. We just say hi. Now, if you guys are good friends, You may choose to hug, but that really varies a lot. Not everyone is comfortable with that. So if you're not sure, you can just follow the other person's lead. If they lean in to give you a hug, you can give them a hug back. And if you ever run into a situation where someone wants to give you a hug and you don't want to, one way to deal with that is to just take a small step back as they try to give you a hug and just offer your hand. It's a little awkward, but I think it sends a clear message to that person. And then lastly, just your overall demeanor. I think Americans tend to be a little more assertive than maybe some people in other cultures. And this is generally viewed as being confident and open, and it's usually considered a positive thing in America and garners respect. And I've heard that this is one thing that can be kind of intimidating for international students because that's just not typical where they're from. And so, I hear especially like in class, the Americans seem just really confident, and it's hard for other people to kind of feel like they belong in that setting. So I want to give you guys some tips on kind of how to match that confidence level, so that you feel more comfortable in those settings. So things you can do are to stand up straight, smile, talk loudly and clearly, make eye contact with the person you're talking to, give a firm handshake if you're meeting someone new, and then when you laugh or talk or eat, don't cover your mouth with your hand. So we're going to do another exercise. So again, nobody can see you, so take this chance to stand up and give your best confidence stance. So you can stand up straight, you can smile, and just you can say one of the phrases we've learned so far. All right, nice job. Okay, so another area where people can easily make mistakes is around food. So again, there's a lot of variation from culture to culture around what to do when you're eating. And what might be perfectly acceptable in one culture could actually be pretty rude in another. So when you're in a context where you're having conversation but also eating, that just adds another level of complexity. So here are a few do's and don'ts in eating. So don't slurp. I know in some cultures, if you're eating something hot, slurping is a perfectly acceptable way to cool your food down. But in America, that's considered impolite. Also, don't hold like a bowl or a plate up to your mouth to scoop food into. Rather, leave it on the table and use your fork or your whatever utensil to eat. Don't talk with food in your mouth. And also, do cut your food into smaller pieces. Don't take like a big piece of food and hold it in your fork and take a bite off of it. And then also, if you're eating something strong, like garlic or coffee, be sure to chew some gum or have a breath mint. And I think Americans are particularly sensitive about bad breath. So if there's a chance you might have bad breath, it's probably safer to just chew some gum. All right, so lastly, one mistake we want to avoid is just awkward endings. And I think it can be tough in any culture to know how to end a conversation because you don't want to seem like you're bored with the conversation, but then letting it go on and on and on when it's really draggy can be just as bad. So here are some socially acceptable ways to finish off a conversation. So one thing we like to say is, I'm sorry, I've got to get to my class or I'm meeting someone else, and kind of making that excuse so that it doesn't seem like you want to leave, but you just have to get to something. And then another thing we like to say is, I'm sure you're really busy, so I'll let you get back to what you're working on, and kind of, put it on them. Like, we don't want to keep you any longer. And then some other ways you can end are, it was good talking with you. Maybe we can get lunch next week. And that's a way to just end it in a nice way, and then also make a plan to continue the relationship. And then if they shared something with you that they're concerned with, you can say, hey, I hope everything goes okay with your qualifying exams or that conflict with your roommate. And that just shows that you were listening and that you're genuinely concerned about what's going on with them. So I just gave you 5 mistakes to avoid and some ways to navigate around them. But I would actually say that the biggest mistake international students make is to avoid conversation with Americans in the first place because they're worried about making mistakes. And I know that it can be scary, and I can guarantee that you will make some mistakes at first, but from all my years of working with international students, as well as being an international student, I can tell you that those that really master the language are the ones who are willing to put themselves out there and try. You know, when I was studying abroad in Brazil, I would ask Brazilians what different words meant or how to say different things. And I would even sit in my room and practice making those same difficult sounds again and again and again until I got it. And towards the end, I was able to make some Brazilian friends who didn't speak English, which is great because then I really had to learn my Portuguese. And these things really helped me, but they took courage and a willingness to make some mistakes at first. So, you know, you're here because you're studying in America or hoping to study in America soon. And that's really going to be your big chance to master English. So I just want to challenge you to put yourself out there and do your best. And that's really going to be your best shot. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much.